Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Do me a favor, people. If you are enjoying the show, you're getting great insights, it's helping you to become a better investor. Leave us that rating and review and tell us what you like about the show. Make sure it's honest feedback because we want to know how to make this work harder so you can be successful. If you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Again, we got a great one today. We're going to be talking to Saket Jain. Saket is the #1 best-selling author, high-performance coach, investor, syndicator, and tech enthusiast, not to mention a philanthropist. He's passionate about achieving financial freedom through real estate, and he is the founder and CEO of Impact Wealth Builders. Now, he has over 15 years of experience in real estate investing, and over the last 5 years, he's taken a particular interest in Class B and C multifamily apartments. Let's welcome to the show, Saket Jain.
Hey, thank you for having me, John. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Absolutely. Listen, I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, definitely. So, as John, you and I were talking about it, if you didn't get it from my accent or my name, I grew up in India. I've been here for over 22 years now, and like any other Indian, real estate is my blood. That's the only thing my dad taught me. Now, he did teach me not to use the debt, but that's a different story. I'm sure he's going to kill me if he knows the debt I have. It's all good debt, though. So I've been buying since probably 2 years into my foray into this country. I started buying real estate, but it was not until 2016-ish time frame when I got serious about it, right? And what I say is that I was gambling in real estate before. I was buying it for appreciation, like most of us do. I think most of us not do, at least did. But in 2016, through a series of events, I unfortunately got laid off. With me being me, I graduated from IIT, which is one of the top engineering colleges in India. I got my MBA from Columbia Business School. I worked for Fortune 500 companies, one of the best management consulting firms. That event where I got laid off shook me to the core. Right? It's kind of like it shook all the beliefs I had in the corporate world, because what happened was, and it's kind of sad because I used to be that 5 or 6 in the boardroom, which will help make a decision who's going to be cut loose, right? Unfortunately, but until it happened to me, I didn't realize how fragile the system was, because I never expected that to happen to me. So that was the time, excuse me, I just basically took charge of my own financial future and dug my heels into real estate at that point. And we were looking at cash flow as a way to find financial freedom. And we started exchanging our appreciated properties into more cash flowing properties, which essentially meant that after paying all the expenses, there was still some left over. Now, very quickly, I realized that it's going to take me a lot of time to get to a point where it would have a material impact into my own life. So I started exploring other things, and that's when I met my coach or mentors and delved into multifamily. I have since invested in 2,000 units across the U.S. as an LP, and also I've active syndications now where I partner with operators who know what they're doing, and they're doing it full time. I don't partner with part-time operators because I don't think this is not a business that can be done part-time. There are aspects of this business that can be done part-time, but once you take investors' capital, especially the operations piece, that cannot be done part-time. So I basically partner with other folks. We have over $100 million of assets under management right now, and we're just going up.
I love it, man. Listen, you gave some great insights on your background. I just want to break it down and make sure we followed some of that. So 22 years you've been in the United States, coming from India. You talked about going to some of the best schools in the world, one of the best colleges in India, graduating, getting your MBA from Columbia, working for Fortune 500 companies, being in that boardroom. And it really wasn't until you were on the other side of some of those employment decisions where you got let go that you really started to recognize how broken and fractured the system actually is. that kind of led you into real estate and taking it more seriously back in 2016, building a portfolio, starting to invest as an LP, and then ultimately now investing as a general partner, bringing other investors into these deals with over $100 million of assets under management. I got to go back to kind of that 2016 timeframe because it really resonates with me and maybe a lot of listeners because, one of the reasons people turn to real estate is because the fear that we have is that you're going to work a job, have a good career, but have very little to show for it. Or maybe a fear you have is you work this job and somebody pulls the plug on you when you're not ready. And that's kind of what I saw early in my career. When I was at GM, when I watched the economic downturn take place, basically on the front row, and I watched my colleagues get let go. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I've got my job, I'm doing well, but don't get mistaken that this can't happen to you. Don't believe the headlines. Don't believe the hype. Like you absolutely could be in line. So you better figure out another plan. You have to insulate yourself from this. And that really is what led me into real estate. And it sounds like you were already in real estate. You used the word gambling. So I want to come back to that. But this kind of allowed you to refocus and say, okay, I'm going to commit to this to build my portfolio. Take me back to that time frame and walk me through you losing your job and looking at your portfolio to say, hey, real estate's working, but I need to take this seriously and I need to revamp my strategy.
Yes, I think before I go in that direction, let me I think you mentioned something, fear, right? I think it's a very key word there. Now, fear could be debilitating or fear could be empowering, right? And I think the way you and I took the fear, our concern, our emotions was in a more empowering manner where we got to take control and do something with it. What my kind of message to your audience would be, make fear your friend, because you got to learn how to dance with the fear, right? If you're not afraid of something, that means you're not doing something right. That means you're not getting out of your comfort zone. So it's a very important element there. And I want, before we lost that chain of thought, I want to make sure I harp on that fear, because it was not really fear. I think it was rude awakening, right? Because you were told, and I was told, and a lot of our fellow listeners are told that if you do X, Y, and Z, when you retire, alpha will happen. Right? Something will happen. And you come to 10 years, 20 years post that age, whatever age you had in mind, let's just say 65, more like 75 nowadays, but let's say 65 for now. Now you're at 45 and you're looking at your net worth, your cash flow, your expenses. You're like, I'm not going to make it, right? So I think it's more of a rude awakening. It's not a fear. Now that may turn into fear very quickly if you don't necessarily anchor that in the right mindset. So I wanted to harp on that point because of that. I think it was, me, I'm more of a mindset person first before mechanics, mindset before mechanics. So we want to make sure that the mindset is correct, right? So distinguish between fear and something that you just found new, and then kind of to go deeper into, am I afraid about this newfound thing, which you probably are, because if it's the first thing you've encountered it's an uncomfortable feeling. But if you're really, really, really afraid of it, then there's something deeper going on and you got to address that. So with that said, let's move on to your real question, which is more about taking you back in 2016. So, for me, it was being an immigrant. And I know you're married to one, so you may be able to relate to it very quickly, is you're told that stay and play within the norms, like within the control boundaries. And those control boundaries are societal norms, that you left your country or I left my country and I have moved to this country. Now I can't be too rebellious. I have to stick to the conventional thinking, and I can't make too many waves, right? It's kind of like, and nobody told me that, but I grew up with that, right? So I kind of like just listened to everyone else and I was conforming. And there's a great, I can't remember the author's name anymore. I think it's Earl something. Strangest Secret. If you just search on that on YouTube, he talks about, I think it's Earl talks about the opposite of courage is not cowardice. The opposite of courage is conformity, right? And I believe in that now. I mean, I never did, but now I do, because courage, for anything courageous, you have to go outside of conventional thinking. And the moment you go out of conventional thinking, you go into being non-conforming, right? And people would ask you several questions. Why aren't you investing in 401k? Like what we did was, we'll go into a few things that you had talked about. It all makes sense. I'll weave a thread into everything. Um, Gambling, right? So what I was doing until 2016 was I was buying something with a hope that it'll get appreciated. That's exactly a gamble. You're sitting at a blackjack table. You have no control on the blackjack. Usually the dealer wins anyways. And you're basically hoping that the cards will be dealt to you. Most people, at least, they don't know how to play blackjack. They're just basically playing and hoping to win. That's exactly what we were doing when we were buying real estate before. We're like, you know what? We're in DC. Let's just buy in DC. DC is always going to appreciate, and eventually it'll make sense. However, all along the way, we were paying the mortgage from our own pocket because it was negative. Right? The cash flow was not there at all. So what happened was in 2016, thankfully, my gambling paid off, which essentially meant was our net worth appreciated, which if you ever hold real estate, it will eventually in the long term will pay off. But in the short term, enough. But what happened was in 2016, when I was laid off, I didn't know. I had to go sell off my net worth equivalent assets, which could be my stocks, which I had none because everything was 401k and IRA, so I can't really touch them until I pay some penalties. Or I had real estate, which had appreciated in value, but I couldn't touch it because I'd have to go sell it. Now I don't really have an asset once I sell it because unless I exchange it for something else, right? So I realized the importance of cash flow, which essentially is the only way that someone like me could have can achieve financial freedom, right? And financial freedom for us was not saying we can take $100,000 vacations. That was never the goal. While that's always an aspiration, our goal was if something like this were to happen to us again in the future, because there's no guarantee that it'll never happen to me, that I'll never get laid off again, or I won't get fired for no fault of mine, it can happen. How would we sustain during that time? Because what had happened in 2016 was we had to take our kids out of private schools. We had to move in with my in-laws, right? Because part of that was even if we wanted to get rid of our assets to have some cash at hand, we couldn't because we didn't want to pay penalty. I mean, we could have done it, but wouldn't have been an ideal way of doing it. We would have to go penalty in 401ks, and real estate is a pretty illiquid asset. When you need it, you may not be able to sell it at the whim's notice, right? It's going to take time. That's when we realized the power of cash flow. So kind of like we shifted from being a gambler, being a speculator, to being an investor, right? We want to start looking at how do you take control of an asset that you can manage, that you can control, that you can have an influence on, and you can increase the cash flow of that, right? And that's really what led me to multifamily, because I mean, you know it, I'm preaching to the choir here, that multifamily is not valued same as the single families, right? So if you do increase the net operating income, your net worth is going up regardless. The whole game is about net operating income, which has very few components to touch. So we're not inventing Google, we're not inventing Amazon, we're not inventing Yahoo, right? That's not what we're doing. We're playing a very, very safe game in an asset class that's proven its worth over periods of time and doing things that are actually very boring. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean it's simple. It's just boring, right? We're not innovating something that does not exist. We're basically copy pasting what has worked in the past and doing it in a way that makes sense in today's world.
Yeah, listen, I love what you just said because there's two things that jump out to me. Working backwards, you said one, you're not inventing the next Google or Yahoo or something crazy complex, right? Real estate at its core is relatively simple. You know, it's not easy, but what you're doing, we can talk about on the podcast, you would understand it. So I love that. And that's exactly what led me to it, right? I was working in corporate America. I was doing big campaigns and trying to figure out how to sell more vehicles and all this other stuff. But I'm like, you know what? I don't want to try to invent something that may or may not work, especially when I know most new businesses fail. Let me do something that's tried and true that 90% of the world's billionaires, or at least the billionaires or millionaires in this country, have used to create wealth. So that's what led me to real estate. And then the second thing you said, which I think is a key insight for this conversation, you looked at your situation and you had real estate, but the real estate you had didn't help solve the problem that you were facing, which
Correct.
was you needed cash flow to insulate yourself from this layoff. And that's where you needed to kind of reverse engineer or re engineer
Mm-hmm.
your portfolio. And for all of our listeners, that's the thing I want you to take away. What is your goal with investing? Do you have kind of, your emergency funds already set aside? Do you have money to invest? If you needed to tap into whatever, $50,000, $100,000, do you have access to that somewhere? And if that's the case, how does real estate help you? Is it truly just a mechanism to create long-term wealth? If so,
Mm-hmm.
great. You can invest in more appreciating assets and take a little bit more of a risk from that standpoint.
Yeah.
But if you are looking to have this replace your income or be a part of that plan to replace your income if you lose your job or if you want to retire early or anything like that, you need to make sure that the way you're investing provides you that cash flow that you need. So, how do you do that? Make sure the strategies you select actually work for what it is you are trying to solve. I see so many people who just start investing in real estate, but they don't really have a plan, or they do what
Mm-hmm.
I did, which was I knew real estate was a great way to supplement my income and protect myself, but I didn't really have a plan to uh, do it in a way that was really passive. So I did a
Right.
lot of active work. And at that time, I was, had a full time job that was already demanding enough. I had my second child. So now I've got two kids in diapers. I'm flipping houses. I'm syndicating apartments. I'm managing our current
It's a lot
portfolio.
of work right there, man.
Dude, I had a second full time job, right? So you talked
Three
about
with
not
the
work.
kids as
Yeah,
well.
three, right?
Yeah.
So you talked about not working with part time operators. And I want to
Yeah.
bring that point back together is because this can be a lot. And if you want to invest, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to be active, you want to lead your own deals, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are a busy professional and if you haven't done this yet, you're adding a lot to your plate trying to do this by yourself or leading it. So it makes sense to
Yeah.
invest passively or be a partner on a deal where someone else who's got the time and the experience can lead it and you can learn. And then you can decide, do I really want to be the lead or do I really just want the returns? And if you want to be the lead, just recognize it's work. It's a job. It is what it is, right? But that's what you're signing up for. So just talk to me a little bit more about that because I know you started
Yeah.
more as an LP, is what it sounds like before you started focusing more on the GP side.
So I always wanted to be an active, right? So kind of like I knew the path I wanted to take. And being the guy I am, I'm always looking 5, 7 years ahead of where I want to be. And I want to build a path towards that. I mean, that's what I do with my coaching clients, where do you want to be, where you are, and how do we build a bridge for you to get there in a more predictable manner. Now, it may not happen in the time frame people are looking for, but that we want to build that bridge, right? And that's exactly what I did for me. So I knew 5 years from today, or 4 years from today, 3 years from today, I want to be full-time active syndicator. I knew that. So, and we can go into why I felt that, but I want to do that. But I also knew several syndicators who were doing it just to check the box that they have done a deal, they're a GP, or they're a partner. Because people throw that number a lot in our ecosystem where I have $1 billion of asset under management, but they may only have 1% of that because that's the only part they control, right? And also, they're not necessarily actively involved because they're doing a very specific piece in a very specific thing, but they don't understand it. They're not conversant. Now, if you know something and you're choosing to take a different role in that thing, that's one thing, because that means you're able to do your own due diligence. You're being smart about who you're investing with. But I can't, if I'm just basing, oh, John, you got a deal? I can raise the capital. Let's partner, right? I have no idea who John is. I
Yeah.
just met him on in a networking event, and you and I see that happening a lot in this world. So part of that was for me is I never wanted to go that route because what I wanted to do was I wanted to sleep peacefully at night when I'm asking John, who's a very good friend of mine, to part away from his hard earned money to go invest on something that I brought to him or her, right? And that was very important for me. So when I started looking, how am I going to get there? The fastest way to do that and the safest way to do that is learn from people who are better than you, who have done that before. So I started looking at syndicators who I could learn from. So I was probably the most active passive investor a sponsor can find, right? I'm like, I want to just absorb because that's the path I want to go. If you can't teach me, that means you're not good for me or my investors because I want to make sure my investors walk away much smarter after investing in my deals because they understand a world which they could never understand before, right? So that was my criteria one. If I can't learn from you, And if you don't have time to teach me, that essentially means you have a very scarcity mindset, especially if I'm putting myself into my 100% into the deal. Now, if I'm not pulling my weight, that's a very different thing, right? But I was committed to making sure that I can learn, and I was bringing my own capital to make sure I'm putting my money where my mouth was.
And Saket, I just want to say too, like, I think it's a really important point because you had a clear vision of what you wanted to get out of it.
Correct.
And you also use that as a filter for the kind of deals and the kind of operators you want to
Correct.
partner with. People, listen, $50,000, and I don't know what your investments were, but 50K, 100K, it's a lot of money for
It's a lot of
people,
money.
right?
Yeah.
Again, if you're raising $10 million for a deal, it may not feel like a big amount of money if you're the operator in the grand scheme of things, but it's that person's $50,000. It's still a lot of money. It's a lot of hard work.
Probably years to get to the 50,000.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It took some sweat equity to build that and to have that money to invest. Yeah. And one thing that's really important is making sure you get everything you want to get out of it. You may not get, again, everything, but you want to partner with people who recognize the whole version of you. That is not just that return you're looking for, but if you are looking for education, if you do want to be more hands-on, make sure you're asking these questions, because some operators are going to say, no, I'm going to give you a return for your money. I'm going to give you an update once a quarter, and that's it. So if you need more than that, I'm not the group for you. And those are the kind of things that I think are important for you to ask. And if you are going to be, as you called it, the most active passive investor, well, that may rub some groups the wrong way and say, hey, man, it's way too much. And other groups may embrace that because they say, you know what, we want to be a teacher, right? It's almost like teaching hospitals. There's teaching investments, right? So some groups are great at teaching and educating their investors on what's going on in the deal. And here's what we look for. Here's why we make these decisions. And some groups are not. So I think that's a filter that you want to have in your pocket when you're asking questions. If you do want to learn, if you do want to ultimately be more active and hands-on, ask the question, hey, will you share information? I'll be able to ask you questions about the deal. Will you make yourself available to give me a little bit more guidance on what's going on or how you're making those decisions?
And John, I think you said something very important, right? And one of my mentors, Robert Helms, with the real estate guys, always says, what is your personal investment philosophy, right? And the criteria for your investment philosophy have to align with the sponsor's philosophy. Yeah. For example, I'll give you an example. We have, for us in our company, Impact Wealth Builders, we have a personal mission to essentially educate, provide K through 12 education to underprivileged kids. Our goal is to support education, K through 12 education for 100,000 kids by the end of 2030, right? So now let's say why that is important for us. It's very important to us is John comes to me and says that, hey, Saket, I want to invest in your deal. I'm not taking your money. I'm not taking your money because if you're not aligned with my passion, eventually there's going to be a friction point. And I would rather not marry somebody if the ultimate path I see is a divorce, right? I would not, because they're painful. Separations are painful. Someone's going to get hurt. And our mission is to educate kids. Now, that does not mean we overlook anything in our investments. We're very responsible with our investments, and we don't ask our investors to donate or to do anything of that nature if they don't want to. We basically take our profits and say a part of our profit is going to go there, right? So our goal is that. That's what's driving us. If that's not driving you, chances are you're not going to like us. So take your 100K, take your 50K. There's enough money in the world. There's enough investors in the world who want to have an impact. There's no reason for you to invest with us. Go find a different sponsor who may be better serving your needs, right? But that's our investment philosophy, and we're very clear about that criteria, that it's not just about money, because we want to make sure we partner with people and surround ourselves with people who are thinking like us. Because what can happen is if you are passionate about adding impact in the world, you may tell us something which we didn't think about, right? Two minds are better than one, always. 1 + 1 = 11 in that case. And we want to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with people who are inspiring us and who are making difference in our lives. So for us, it's a community. We want to build a tribe. We want to build the people who actually want to create a community that's a thriving community, not just an investor. But again, that's our investment philosophy. Does not mean our investors have to like it. But if they don't like it, we have a choice to say yes or no. And that's a hard choice. Most sponsors, as you said, while the 50, 60K is a lot of money, they're not able to raise the capital, right? especially if in the times like this right now, raising capital is a little bit harder because a lot of people's stock portfolio has gone down, which ultimately means that they're not feeling wealthy. They never were wealthy, unfortunately, because of stock portfolio, but right now they're not feeling wealthy, right? And those cycles are going to go up and down. There's going to be time where people are going to be all hyped up. The people at the time, there's going to be people are going to be down. What we want to do is, because you have a belief in a passion and a cause, you are a little bit more long-term thinking. You're not just thinking about, oh, my portfolio is going to go up, I'm going to sell or could sell. Oh, my money is illiquid. Because a lot of those belief systems come because you want to make quick money. What we're saying is that we're in the long run, we're in the long game. We want to partner with investors who are in the long game and who actually feel good by partnering with us because they're adding value in somebody else's life. Did I answer your question? I know I've done different places. Did I answer your original question or not?
I don't even remember the question, to be honest with you.
There you go.
But yes, I'm sure you did. But I was going to say, your company is Impact Wealth Builders. And as we're having this conversation, I think it's really interesting because you talked about impacting education from the K through 12. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you're impacting the wealth of those investors and the people around you. And you mentioned that long-term view and why it's important. Because when we started this conversation, we were really getting at, the different operators and making sure that there's alignment as far as, if you want to be asking a lot of questions and all those kind of things. But obviously impacting wealth is really big for you. And I love that. We've got our coaching program called the Capital Impact Club. And nice. I think it's very similar aligned where it's about the impact on the next group, not necessarily just for you. And I want to dig in more for you because you talked about K through 12 and helping them understand about wealth and generating wealth for their families. Why is this mission so important to you?
Man, you're going to take me way back. So I grew up in a family where my dad grew up in a family where he did not have enough money to buy his own underwear. They were putting it hand-me-downs. So, and I don't have a memory of that, but knowing who I was as a kid, I don't think I understood what he was trying to tell me. Right? I'm sure I laughed when he said that. I'm sure I was a kid who just basically didn't understand the gravity of the situation. But now that I reflect back, he has since passed away, but now I reflect back at my memories of that story when he tells me is there was a life lesson that he was trying to tell me is that you don't forget where you come from, but also don't let that be the limiting factor for you to go forward, right? So what he did for me was my mom and dad put a lot into my education. And for those of you who do not know the school IIT in India, 300,000 applications come in and only 2,000 get selected, right? And the entire India is competing for that. And that enabled me, that platform that they were able to provide me through investing in my own education is why, John, you and I are talking. Otherwise, who knows where I was, right? I have no idea. So I give a lot of credit for education to be not the only way, the fastest way for folks who can't make the ends meet. Right. Like in my dad's case, their parents couldn't provide them just a basic necessity of clothing. They had to wait for somebody to hand it down for them. Now, we're fortunate that we have surpassed that problem, but now there are tons of kids in India, and not just India. India just happened to be close to me because I'm from there and I know the problems there. So we're like, you know what? What can we do to make sure there's no next Saket or Saket's dad who does not have a basic necessity of food, clothing, and shelter taken care of? Because until that piece is taken care of, you're not going to think about building wealth, right? You're not going to think about surpassing your current boundaries. You're going to live in a conformed world, which I completely disagree in. Everyone can break through. And it doesn't take smarts, right? It doesn't take for somebody to go to Columbia Business School or Harvard Business School to break out and build their wealth. There are other ways, and there are ways which are there. But unfortunately, until your basic necessities are taken care of, you're not going to see forward. So what we did in 2008, me and my wife, is we actually took a sabbatical. We sold everything we had, every material possession that we had. And we moved into an ashram, which essentially is, for those of you who don't know what an ashram is, a monastery. We lived with monks for about 2 years, and we basically meditated with them throughout the day. And we went to villages and grassroots problems, situations where we're seeing the impact of education, somebody teaching them English, somebody teaching them math, the healthcare, the food, the volunteering, the impact that had on their life. Now, through a series of events, we ended up coming back to the US and we were lost. when we came back because we got stuck in the material world again because of our own issues. Not that the world was bad, it's because we got lost. So when in 2020, during the COVID timeframe, I lost 5 of my family members, including my sister, who was 2 years older than me, and my mom, right? And my five uncles, and then my brother had a heart attack. It's kind of like the series of events basically made me and my wife pause. Life's trying to teach us a lesson, right? Nothing in life happens without a lesson behind it. It's our job. Life's never going to tell you this is the lesson. It's our job to figure out what the lesson is. For our interpretation of the lesson, and it could be wrong, but it served us well, is life's short, and we really want to make the impact happen ASAP. Now, we may not hit 100,000 kids. We may not. Even if we hit one, I'm happy. Our goal is to surpass 100,000. But if we have that big audacious, what is it called, BHAG?
Big, hairy, audacious
goal. If our BHAG is 100,000, even if we hit 25, even if we hit 50, I'm happy. I'm not going to be depressed that I didn't hit my goal, because the goal is immaterial. The goal is a direction. The goal is a North Star. If we don't hit in 2030, we'll hit in 2050. I don't care. But it's moving us an inch forward towards impacting somebody else's life in a way that's sustainable. Right? That's important. What happened back in 2008 was we were hoping that donations will be sufficient, right? What now we're saying is you don't need donations. We're going to figure out a way where John can make his money and we can have an impact in a way that's more sustainable, because that's how the world should work. Because if donation has to work, John, you may donate $5,000 today, but you may have a sickness in the family or some family event that happens tomorrow, and you're like, my life's more important than somebody else's. I got to first take care of my own, right? But the impact on the other kids who are depending on that donation is pretty high. So what we're trying to do, we're decoupling the two, and we're saying it can happen together, and it can happen in a way that's it's not a burden on anyone. Because if it's not a burden on anyone, that means we can make it more sustainable.
I love it. Listen, I really enjoy the way you break down your journey, right? You talk about living in the monastery and just the impact it had on you, and obviously losing some family members, which certainly hits a chord with a lot of our listeners there during that COVID timeframe, and just having that greater impact. I think ultimately that's the thing that makes this so unique is, yes, you can invest. I mean, listen, to be honest with you, you could just work your day job and be fine, right? You get let go, you get another job.
I mean, even if you get laid off, you'll find something else.
You find another job, you figure out a way to pay your bills, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about leaving an impact, creating wealth, impacting the next generation, living a life that is bigger than us and having an impact that is beyond what we can do, that's where all these things come into play. And that's why multifamily is so important for us, at least, because it allows us to impact the masses, both from the investors that we can help create generational wealth for, but also for ourselves, because now we can take some of those proceeds and impact other causes that we're passionate about. It sounds like you're doing the same thing. I want all of our people to check you out. Go to impactwealthbuilders.com if they want to learn more about you and some of the things that you're working on. And I know that you do some consultation, right? You're a high performance coach. You help some other people. And I think you have a special offer for some of our listeners. Yeah,
John, thank you. Thank you again for kind of reiterating that. I think I should be my spokesman, man. You speak so much better than me. Maybe there's an arrangement, we can figure it out. But you can, what I want to do for listeners, our goal is always to add value and add impact, right? So what I want to do, John, because I believe in the mission that you have, as in if somebody, whoever that is, if your listeners leave a rating for you, and it doesn't have to be 5-star, I hope it's 5-star, but any rating which is honest, and especially if they've touched a chord in their heart and it resonates with them. It doesn't have to be for this show. It could be any show you did. Send me a clip. Email me at saket@impactwealthbuilders.com. That's SAKET@impactwealthbuilders.com. Send me a screenshot of that. I'm going to give you an hour of my time as a complimentary wealth building strategy. Wherever you are in your journey, you could be a new passive investor. You could try to figure out how to break into the syndication world. You may have a good, successful syndication business that you want to take it to the next level. For what we didn't cover is I was a management consultant. So I was actually helping businesses grow, businesses scale. And that was my training. I did that for over 18, 20 years. So I know a thing or two about helping you scale and helping you address your business problems. I am going to give away an hour of my time to the first 20 listeners if they send me the screenshot.
I love it. Well, listen, check that out, impactwealthbuilders.com. And if you want that free training or that free business consultation, you can email them at socket, SAKET, at impactwealthbuilders.com. We're going to go to a round of insights. You ready?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
My belief that a job is secure. And I'm so glad I got laid off. I know I could not have said that 2016. I could not have said it. But that event changed everything about me in terms of my belief system, my ecosystem, everything. So sometimes these limiting beliefs help you, but something in life has to shake you up for those beliefs to work in favor of you.
There you go. All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Headspace. Right. I mean, we talked about in 2008 my journey, the impact that meditation has added for me. It's my daily routine, daily practice. I believe that you need to carve out the time. I don't do journaling. That's not my forte. But I just sit in the quiet space, and that space is just for me and me only. So a lot of folks can't do meditation because they don't necessarily know how to. And Headspace is one resource. And there's several. Headspace is something that comes to mind because I've used it in the past. It'll get you into that space, in the training space, through guided meditations.
Give me the book that you recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
It's my own book. I just wrote the book or co-authored a book called Think Big. It has stories of over 40 entrepreneurs, and those entrepreneurs they're a very good friend of mine. They are some of us who are constantly inspiring me. And over the last 10 to 12 days, I mean, you know that, John, there was Diwali. It's Indian New Year that happened last week. I gave away over 150 books as a gift for Diwali because that book has the potential to change somebody's life.
I love it, man. You mentioned this already, I think, but give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Meditation, man. Meditation is one thing, no matter what I'm doing, no matter where I am. Even if for 2 seconds, I usually do 45 minutes. Even if I need to even if I carve out 5 seconds of it, I will do it.
Give me your number one insight for multifamily investing.
It's a team sport. It's a team sport, and it's a business. It's not real estate. If you want to get into the active side of it, make sure you want to run a business. Right. Just because John's doing it and I'm doing it doesn't mean everyone can and should.
I love it, man. All right, let's lighten the mood. You are out there in Raleigh, North Carolina. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
We just moved here 3 months ago, man. So we haven't picked our favorite place yet. The good thing is there are probably hundreds of Indian restaurants, which is what I love. My favorite food is Indian food. So I'm trying them out. Ask me that question 2 months later, I will have a favorite restaurant.
All right, man. We'll check back in on you. All right, listen, You gave us some great information. I appreciate you sharing your journey coming from, humble beginnings, moving to the country 22 years ago and having a strong education, right? Going to some of the best schools in the world and using that to build a corporate career, but then realizing once you got let go that you really needed to focus on real estate, starting off as kind of an LP investor, transitioning to more on the active side of the business and helping other people through both your book, through the podcast that you have, through high performance coaching, and also through the investment opportunities that you offer. Just really appreciate your journey and your perspective. And really the fact that you are looking big, right? Looking to impact the world and looking to impact others, particularly those K through 12 education. Again, if anyone wants to learn more about you, what you're doing or what you're working on, they can find you at impactwealthbuilders.com and they can send you an email at socket@impactwealthbuilders.com. I want to thank you again for coming on the show, being a great guest. We hope you stay in touch and have a great day.
Well, thank you, John, for having me. I really enjoyed the time.